Welcome to episode 128 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And this movie taught me everything I needed to know about wearing capes, and I've been doing it ever since.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And this film gave me a weird pain in my neck.
So joining us today with better jokes than we have, Josh Ickes is back. Josh, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Don't count on those better jokes. It's been a long weekend, man.
We'll see. So, we have to get their hopes up so they continue. All right.
Dangle that carrot.
Exactly. Would you like to tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Yes. Let's see. I am music journalist, filmmaker, podcaster, host of Nashville CA, along with my co-host, where we do double features every other week. Except for October, we're going weekly with guests, really getting into spooky season this year. So I'm excited about that.
That's fantastic.
Right.
And you are kicking off our look at the Universal monsters this month, starting with Dracula, because, of course, it was the first one. And normally I would say, hey, man, why'd you pick this? But, I was like, hey, tell me you love Dracula because I need a guest. and it totally worked out, and I was super excited. But why don't you just kind of walk me through what the Universal monsters have meant to you?
I mean, they are literally like my grounding for a lot of horror. I think as a kid, my mom would reference these movies all the time. It was these and Psycho were kind of the big touchstones for her, especially Creature from the Black Lagoon. That one was very big. But of course, when I was young, the remake of Dracula came out. The Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mm-hmm. And I not only I bought the novelization and the original book with a new cover on it, on the occasion of that release, and read both of them because that's how into Dracula I was. Just the mythos, I love the different takes on the character that you see from the Coppola one, this one, Nosferatu. All of them they can be so drastically different, but I think this is really the defining moment for what most people think of as this character. I think everybody else afterwards has to contend with this particular iteration.
Absolutely. I was amazed at how many of the things that we believe are the stereotypes of vampires came from Bela Lugosi's performance, either, just how he did it over the years. And even the way he speaks, mm-hmm. If they had gotten an actor from London, Dracula in modern culture wouldn't speak the way he does. It's so crazy. And I was joking before we went live that they were very woke back then and knew that representation matters, and they got a Hungarian actor. And while I'm joking about that, it's amazing how much that actually influenced how we hold on to Dracula and how we do keep him in Transylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also really works because, as we're going to get into, I'm sure, so much of Dracula is about the outsider coming in and fucking up your society. He's bringing in other ideas and he's this scary force that's changing your culture. And so having a Hungarian actor do that adds that level of the outsider because he's not the same as everyone else.
That's absolutely, I feel like that theme especially got picked up in Salem's Lot, where he really took that thread of the outsider intervening in a community that was already tight-knit. And, I mean, he's vaguely European, and he kind of plays with both sides of the more urbane through his consort, and then through the monstrous version of Barlow himself. And I'm wearing my Barlow shirt today in honor of our vampire talk. So
fantastic. I'm wearing pajamas that have all the Universal monsters on them because I'm lazy and refuse to get dressed.
I love it.
But I also have my Dracula cape, as I mentioned earlier. Trust me. Don, what are you wearing? You know what? Don't answer that. I'm scared.
I think people are going to have to sign up for the Patreon or the OnlyFans to find that one out.
Don will be selling his bathwater later today.
No, this is something I thought about with this movie, especially with this movie, because it seems as though vampires themselves, not just Dracula, but vampires themselves seem to have a much grander following than any of the other monsters that we typically are exposed to, where you have a good number of films based off of it, stories, fan fiction, television shows. You've got a lot of stuff out there that revolves around this that is a lot more popular than, I don't know, even if we were to do a movie or a TV show about werewolves, right? Or another movie about the wolf, it doesn't have that same pull as, a film about vampires or a story about vampires. I mean, even Twilight, I don't know shit about Twilight. I know it's about vampires. I know that werewolves are involved, but even then it was like the werewolves weren't that interesting to the general audiences. It was more about, the guys without their shirts on, which was the appealing part. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were werewolves or the werewolf lore. But this one, it's. I think when it comes to vampires, it's that mix of the macabre, the dark, the romantic aspect of it, if you want to call it romantic in some cases, or at least in some stories. The hypersexualization, not necessarily in this film, because they never go that route. One, because of the timing of the film, or even just the things like seclusion, which you see with other monster movies, whether we're talking about the Frankenstein films or King Kong, The Mummy, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I think there are a good number of people that can, I guess, relate to that, but then also, to an extent, are almost envious of the power that somebody like Dracula has to be alone for a while, but then still feeling that need to have some type of companionship. Or just create that companionship in some cases.
Well, you mentioned the hypersexualization. The very first kill that he makes is the woman in an alley, I think it was, and he kind of grabs her very like sexually and moves in for the kiss, and they pan away from it. So I think it's actually still there. And it really drove home to me the fear of the monster coming to take our women. And I think that's true in all 5 movies that we're looking at this month. Every single one of them in some way is about a monster coming to take our white women.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to even include xenophobia, it's not, that monster or that outsider. Xenophobia is at the center of all this. And you can talk about it in terms of, this film is supposed to be, or set in London, but you also have other movies where the subject, or excuse me, the setting itself is in the United States. And that same thing, if it's a Western nation, that same theme comes up of somebody's coming from the outside to take our women away from us. Whether it happens to be due to ethnicity, nationality, race, whatever, there's that continuous fear that, I have to protect them. Like you see with Jonathan Harker in this film, and even in the Coppola version, it's I have to protect her. I have to make sure she's safe. I have to do all these things. When what they're really doing is they're treating the women as if they don't have any, if they don't have any will themselves to determine who they want to be with. It's, well, you can't be with this guy because he's too different. He's not good for you. I'm good for you. Where
I'm a nice guy, damn it.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Josh, before I cut you off?
I was going back to the seductive quality and kind of the eroticism of it was really played up in. Did either of you guys watch the miniseries from BBC from last year or 2 years ago?
I did not.
Okay. That one, it jumps in time, but the beginning is like very close to the same premise and everything. And Claes Bang, the Danish actor, stars, and he's just like kind of dripping this very Eastern European sort of class all over everybody, and it's fantastic in that way, but also it really plays up the seductive angle and the destructive portion of that, of the idea that there's the outsider who is going to get you, who really is an outsider even unto himself, is lost his humanity. And they really play with that, especially like in the latter half of the show, to really good effect, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that the class thing is such a huge thing with vampires. I've long believed that the reason they're so popular compared to a lot of the others is because they're the one that's like almost better than us. Like they're usually the higher social class. They're dressed well. They have that seductive quality. Like everything about them is basically like James Bond if he was, gonna eat you afterwards, right? But then you have like werewolves, and you have Frankenstein's monster and all these pieces, and he's, decomposing flesh, and everybody else is like a monster that you probably don't want to be. I'm different. I want to be a werewolf, but outside of that, like they're actual monsters. Like they're not better human qualities. And so I've always wondered if that's the big pull to vampires, because they do seem way more popular with my non-horror friends. Like that's the monster they care about is always vampires.
I can definitely see the class aspect, because it's whether you're talking about this film, the Coppola one, TV series like True Blood, there's always, and I'm just thinking about all the characters, especially from True Blood, that are typically vampires. The way they even have their hierarchy, it's based off of royalty. So the way they divide up parts of the world is like, I'm the king of, whatever this section is, or I'm the queen of Louisiana, and this person is the king of Mississippi, and this person. So they have their own structure that's built into where they then are raking in money from other people paying them or paying their dues towards them to maintain this system. And then they use that power, use that influence in so many different ways. And even with this film, when Dracula introduces himself, he's not, hey, I'm Robert Dracula. It's like I'm Count Dracula, where you have that sense of aristocracy builds him, it builds upon who he is, to where people aren't necessarily going to see him as weird if he were just some dude who lived down the street who walked around in a full tux and a cape.
Yeah, like in my neighborhood, that guy's a weirdo.
So it's excusable. It's like, hey, I can interrupt you. I'm sorry, as I'm interrupting somebody, it's like I could interrupt you guys while you're at the opera because of who I am. You won't give a shit about me saying anything to you because I'm not just some regular pissant human being.
I was gonna say, I feel like the class structure is definitely played up through all like the Christopher Lee films and all of those, yes. Where he's always played as that. Somebody's social better, but in more modern things like Blade, where the vampires and even some of the humans look at the vampires as the next step in evolution, as better than humans in that way, more adept. And I think in Dracula Untold, he's more of a superhero even than someone who's cursed. It's like, it definitely plays with both sides of that. And I think that's really, it's interesting to look at it from the social aspect, but also from almost a eugenics aspect of that's what they're arguing for in some of these movies, that like the humans are just here to be cattle and here to be prey because they are lesser than all the vamps.
I like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Like that it's still always a better form of human, but in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's also that aspect of, as both of you were bringing up, that idea of privilege that comes along with it, right? You have access to a lot of different things that other people would not have as a vampire, right? beyond the wealth. So because of the time that they would have lived, I mean, assuming that this person is hundreds of years old or thousands of years old, they not only they have the advantage of that time and that interaction with people to where they can understand how to play the game, or at least play with people's fears or play with their insecurities in order to get over on them.
But I feel like that gets played in different ways and more modern, like something like Only Lovers Left Alive, where the time has been damaging to their psyches. Okay. Like it weighs on them after a while. And I think that's an interesting, more, like I said, more modern context to look at it in, like the mental health aspect of being a Dracula, of being trapped forever. And I guess the Anne Rice version plays with that with the child vampire. I don't remember. Right. But being, stuck at that stage of your life forever, which is, definitely the downside. It would be not great. If you're in the prime of your life, that's fantastic. But what if you're either like 12 or 82? Those would both suck.
Well, what's funny is they covered that in addition to Interview with the Vampire. They covered that in True Blood. I can't remember the actor's name. He plays Bill on King of the Hill. He plays a bunch of different things. He played like the cuck, the cuckold on Dodgeball. But he's a new vampire, but he's out of shape. And one of the people, because the early parts of the show, it was about using vampire blood to become stronger, to go into the eugenics part. You could drink their blood basically as a performance enhancing drug to make yourself faster, more sexually active, smarter. So they capture this one vampire who's, he's out of shape. He's older. And he's sitting there and apologizing. Is like, I know I'm not that attractive of a vampire. I got turned later in life. And, he's like an insurance salesman. Like he has some normal type life, but he works at night. And he's explaining like, you see, I'm sure you would have much rather seen one of these vampires who's all fit and sexy and stuff. But, this is what I am. This is who I am. And you see a vampire at that moment as a sympathetic character, kind of like the Kirsten Dunst's character in Interview with the Vampire, because they can't change. They are stuck that way. They're not going to age. They're not going to get younger either. They're going to be whatever that status is for the rest of their lives or rest of their undead lives. So I guess if you're going to get turned, it's kind of like the Sixth Sense. You better pick out whatever outfit you're going to wear the day that you die, so you're comfortable in that, or you get your body in the condition that you want it to be in if you know that you're going to be turned into a vampire.
That's it. I'm decided. I'm going to start working out today because I don't want to be like this for all eternity. I'd be walking around like, no, I got bit during COVID times. It wasn't my fault. And so I'm going to have to start.
If that's not a vampire movie, I don't know what is. Before we even get into that, what do you think would be the biggest, other than not aging and or at least maybe even outliving people around you? What do you think would probably be the biggest hang up of being a vampire?
I like to do things during the day that I don't do and do things during the night that I don't do during the day. And I feel like a lot of my favorite places to eat would be closed.
Well, you could probably still go out because, the vampire lore changes. So that's true. If you're just more sensitive to the light, as far as a vampire, you just happen to be more sensitive to it. Because there have been movies where they've approached this where even in Blade, they do the whole thing with we're just going to wear extra sunblock. Or what was the other movie? Bordello of Blood, where one of the vampires is she goes out and the dead giveaway for Dennis Miller's character that the person's a vampire is because they smell like coconut. I mean, they smell like sunblock. So, and that's the one thing that gives it away when he finds out that this one girl is a vampire. He's like, wow, what's that perfume you're wearing? It's, I love coconut smell. She's like, it's sunblock. And he's, then that's the end of him. But consider it's Dennis Miller. I wish it had been the end of him. Anyway.
Really fast. Okay. I just want to add that if food is going to be my driving force here, What we do in shadows taught me that that's not going to work out anyway. So I'm probably screwed all around and don't need daytime. So, all right, Josh, what's your answer?
I think the destruction of the planet would probably be the major thing. Right now, if I was a vampire and I was looking at the climate change, I'd just be really pissed because I'm like, I can live forever. I can survive through this. But there's not going to be anything else around, and that's just going to suck.
Just you and the other vampires walking around?
Yes.
That's pretty great.
I think for me, it would probably come down to food. If the vampire lore holds up where you can no longer consume food, that might be bothersome.
So there you go. Our biggest fears of being vampires come down to what we do in the shadows. Great.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Wait a second. Well, here's the thing I don't understand. Is it I can't taste the food as far as I can't try or sample the food, or I can't fully consume the food to process it, because I haven't seen anything that's fully confirmed it for me. I just know in some movies or some stories, for that matter, it's the idea of not eating because you're not going to be satiated by normal food. So your hunger for blood is not going to be quenched because of you've actually consumed, a hamburger or whatever. You're still going to...
I'll dip my French fries in blood. It'll work itself out.
It's the best of both worlds.
All right, so let's get to this actual film and break down some of these scenes, shall we? Cool. The thing people came for? No, I'm kidding. But nobody came here. So the big thing for me, just to start this off, and I will say this on a couple of the other episodes, I'm sure, but I used to work overnights, and I don't remember what channel it was, but it would just show monster movies like on loops, right? Like it would just be on almost every weekend when I worked. And so I saw a lot of these, but I saw them like in pieces. Like I would watch a little bit, I'd go do some work. I worked at group homes for people with disabilities. So like I had to clean or take care of people or whatever. And so I'd be watching, then I'd go do stuff and come back. And so a lot of these movies ran together for me, like Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Like I couldn't have told you the fucking difference before we started doing this.
Right.
But Dracula was like always the one that I would sit there and just watch all of, because I was so fascinated with Lugosi's performance. And so this is probably the one I was most excited to talk about just because of him. But really rewatching it, like it had been like 20 years since I'd seen it. And I was, number one, amazed at how well these films hold up. And then also just like his performance is still so great to me. Like I would put it in some of my top performances ever. And I was wondering if you guys feel that way as well, or if he just speaks to me on another level or what.
No, I think it definitely holds up because I think it is iconic, and the way that the stiffness and the formality of this persona that he's put on. I mean, it's like it's partially Bela Lugosi himself and partially his the act that he honed on stage. I mean, he had done this for years on stage apparently before he got cast in the movie. So he really kind of knew how to play it up, and I think it rubs against the other actors of the time, and it creates a very interesting kind of frisson because he's doing something different than a lot of the actors are doing. And I think it makes it feel more alive. And the use of close-ups on him,
right,
where he's like just this big head floating in space practically whenever someone looks at him with just the pinpoint lights in his eyes, and it's hypnotic. Like as an audience member, it's hypnotic. And I think it really works still.
Yeah, I like that. It is hypnotic. That's a great word for it.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to make this 3 for 3, but yeah, I definitely have to agree with it because this is the first time I've seen this movie in a while. And out of everybody that was in this film, he's the only one I remember specific things about as far as the way that they carried the scenes. Maybe even the gentleman who was playing Renfield. But it just seems as everyone who was playing off of him was outshined. And especially like you just said, Josh, the parts where they do the close up and it's just kind of that the highlight of his eyes to where he's communicating with that person, where later films and television adaptations, you would be able to hear his voice as far as what he's saying to the person. With Renfield's interaction, it's kind of like, holy shit, they're doing so well with this, because now you get an understanding of the control that he has, because Renfield's the only one who responds, verbally responds to whatever voice is in his head from Dracula. But no, it's everything that he's done in this film works, definitely holds up. It doesn't seem as though it ages, but then it also feels as though he did it so well that other people that were portraying this role had to borrow so much from him to create their own, or at least have a lasting impact with the ones that they play.
And you mentioned Renfield, played by Dwight Frye in this movie. I just wanted to mention that Dwight Frye in 1931 was in Dracula, The Maltese Falcon, and Frankenstein.
Damn, dude.
Okay.
That dude killed it that year.
I hope his contracts all said residuals instead of a one-time payment.
No kidding.
But no, Renfield was so much better than I remembered him in my head. Like in my head, I was like, hey, he goes a little crazy. And then I watched it. I was like, God, I love this dude. And the staring, it's borderline funny to me now. Because it's 2021 and that wouldn't work the same way, right? So it looks a little goofy. But I noticed the more that it happened, the more, I didn't feel threatened by it, but the more I felt that feeling they were trying to convey. Like the first one, I was like, that's silly, but after a while, it really started kicking in for me. And I would just love to know how it felt to watch it at the time. To be there in 1931, seeing this, you're not used to stuff on this level, I would love to know if those scenes were actually frightening, I just think that would be really interesting to get to experience.
What do you make of the changes, especially towards the beginning of this, where instead of Harker, it's Renfield is the solicitor going to Dracula's castle? It's interesting to mash that up a little bit and give a backstory for Renfield, which he doesn't get all the time.
Right. I liked it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I like that approach because in the film, let's just say the Coppola film, which I've seen a lot more times than I've seen this one. I feel there's no connection to Renfield at all, other than he's some crazy kook who happens to be eating bugs inside of an insane asylum, or even in the video game Dracula Unleashed. I'm really going to age myself with this one, where it seems like Jonathan Harker gets obviously a bigger role in that, as well as in Keanu Reeves' portrayal of him in the film. So you never really get as good of a taste of who Renfield is like you do in this film. And you get to see that, I won't even say descent into madness. You get to see how Dracula uses him, quickly gets him to become his slave, gets him to arrange all of the stuff to move him to England to carry out whatever his mission is when he gets there, and then continue on, which I found hilarious that, and to go with what James was saying, I would love to see what people were thinking at this time, because just the fact that Renfield keeps escaping is funny to me. Like nobody's watching. He's escaped several times already, and you don't have someone watching his cell to make sure that he's not getting out.
Well, it's great because they're just like, oh, he left again.
He left again? What? I'm pretty sure I locked the gate this time, innit?
This place was not run well. That's what we're saying.
No, I expected to see lots of other people wandering around, but it's just him. He's the only one who can get out, apparently, anytime he feels like it. When he needs to come into a room and say something creepy to everybody, and they're all like, knock it off. I love that.
Really makes me wonder about this place. I want to know more about it now. But maybe that plays into the change with Renfield as well. Maybe it was Like a lot of times in books, I feel like there's characters that could have easily been combined instead of making me learn more people. And I feel like that could be what happened here. And maybe it was budgetary, maybe it was ease, maybe it was just we think it's a better story, whatever. Like I felt like it really worked for me. I liked Renfield this way. I like that he has the backstory, like you said, and it made him more interesting to me because you get to see his whole change. You get to see how Dracula actually influences him. It's not, hey, I'm already crazy, I want to follow that crazy guy. It's I interacted with him. This came to me. Now I'm eating bugs. Now I'm yelling weird things. Now I'm running around the castle trying to be his friend. Like there was an actual flow to it for me.
And the fact that it opens with him, it makes it feel like he is going to be your protagonist for the movie, which you more have an ensemble and it kind of gets handed off as the movie goes along until I guess it's Van Helsing and Harker in this version. But it's mostly Dracula's movie and Renfield's second, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that too. Yeah, the others are just kind of there to bring a close to it,
Yeah. And I do love that aspect of it. When you get to the end of the movie, it is monster's dead, movie's over. That's it.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no extra stuff here. We don't need to know what happened to anyone else. We're just done.
Yep.
How'd you get out of the room? Nobody knows. We don't care. Move on.
You don't need to have Mina like turn around and you see that her eyes now have that same look as Dracula's.
Oh, man.
I mean, because you just leave it as is. Like, we don't need that extra thing there. I mean, also you want the happy ending for the film, like you would have with a lot of other films during that period. You don't want to end on, I don't want to say a vague note or a dubious ending, but you want to have this good ending that everybody can look to it and say, like, hey, we defeated the monster. It's over. And not think of what other types of ramifications you would probably have to face. Or even wonder what the hell is Van Helsing going to do? It's like, oh, I'll be up there in a minute. You guys go ahead.
Right.
He's like, all right, okay, we scammed the people in this town, Dracula. Let's go ahead and move over to Paris now. Let's go to New York.
I would love to see that as an alternate ending. That would be fantastic. The two of them like on a boat, like drinking champagne and talking about their latest con. That'd be fantastic. I'd love it.
It's like, and Renfield everyone else was cleaning out the house while we were down there. They thought he killed him. He just fell down the stairs and then went through the secret hatch, like Frankenstein does in that movie.
We'll talk about that next week. But yeah, no, it's an early version of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Trust me, it'll be great. So,
what about the fact that I didn't realize this until doing some research the past couple days, that this is the truncated version of the film. The original version ran longer. It ran about 85 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
I would like to see the rest of that.
Yeah. As apparently when they re-released it in 36, was when the production code had started to be enforced, and so they had to make cuts to fit in with the code at the time. And that's the version that's existed ever since.
So they must have cut out the stake and the heart scene, because I've seen stills of it. Mm-hmm. I just haven't seen the actual video footage of it, which again, it makes sense because there were movies, and one that I always like to reference is Mae West's Klondike Annie, where it was so heavily censored because of the way the film was going. Like, she's basically escaping from an abusive relationship with her husband who is Chinese, but is really a white guy in yellow face. But she escapes from an abusive relationship by killing him. But they show it. It's in the original cut. They show her stabbing him with this knife that he is so proud of, that he's showing all of his guests, and when he's bringing them into his hotel or his mansion or whatever it is. But even the original ending of the film was she was supposed to get away with her new love interest, but they had her change the film to where it's like, no, you have to go back and face justice because you're wanted by the law. Much like this film, it is the same way we had to have some type of resolution, or you had to cut the violence down to make sure that the general public was comfortable with what they were seeing.
I think that period especially is interesting. Of it was a slower switch to the production code than I always thought. I did some I don't remember what podcast I listened to, maybe Hypnagogia, where he detailed Universal specifically, and the fact that they, for a while, the code was like a suggestion, and it didn't have to be enforced. And even once it started to get enforced, they would try everything they could to get around it. And so there's not like this super clean line between pre-code and code movies. There was that blending where they were still trying to get away with the more risque material and get away with having anti-heroes, which is something the code did away with. You couldn't have someone who had committed a murder not face their justice. They had to by the end of the movie. And I think that's really interesting, that kind of gray period in between there.
I didn't realize there was a gray period. That's absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my head, it's always like here's the code. Everybody enforce it right now, or else, like.
And in that series, he talks about like the difference between British and American censorship at the time, and the difficulty of getting things when they started to be distributed worldwide. And then the sound era came along. Suddenly, it was still cheaper to do silence, but everybody wanted sound. But now you have to either dub your movie or do what they did for Dracula, which is shoot a separate version of the movie at night in the 12 hours that your crew is not working.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on a future episode, which we've already recorded, but how the Spanish version of Dracula was being filmed while the English version was. And so then I started reading about it. I didn't realize what a common practice it was to double use sets and stuff. I think it's kind of interesting to me that we don't do stuff like that as often now. And not that it's as needed, because we can just blow massive money on anything. But I look at I'll pick on Blumhouse for a second. Like, I look at their model and it's all about saving money. So why wouldn't you, like, if you have this scene in another movie, like you could double film, like, I don't know.
Oh yeah. Roger Corman that shit. And
yeah, exactly.
Use it around the clock. Yep.
You have it. Why not?
Yep.
Plus, people like me probably wouldn't even notice. We'd read about it later in 15 things you didn't know about this movie. So, not that I just incessantly click those.
Yeah, those are made for you.
Everyone's like, have you seen it? No, but I know 95 weird facts about it. Yeah, that's my movie-going experiences.
It's part of your love of spoilers.
It is, yeah.
Okay, this is kind of a fucked up question. Well, I guess no, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
I guess the answer can be kind of messed up. But along with, the benefits of being a vampire, James kind of answered this one without the question being asked earlier. Is there an ideal job? Since we talked about typically these vampires are seen as, or at least have the benefit of being wealthier or privileged or whatever the way they're represented. If a vampire had a normal job, what do you think would probably best suit a vampire who isn't blessed with money or fame or some type of notoriety?
I have had 2 jobs that would fit this perfectly.
Do tell.
Yes. When I lived in Colorado, I drove taxi, and I primarily drove at night because drunk people, if they like you, they give you nice tips, which I always appreciated. They did occasionally throw up in the car, which sucked. But I did a lot of driving at night, and I also was a security guard overnight for a hospital, which I wanted to set a vampire story in that exact setting because I had the keys and access to all of these medical labs, including the blood work lab. And I always thought that would be fascinating. I was always like, okay, I was on one side, and then there was still the emergency room was open on the other side, and they had an actual policeman over on that side. But the area where I was where all the offices and labs were. And I was like, what if a Dracula comes in here and suddenly wants into these labs, and I'm the only thing in between him and, the blood bank, essentially.
I can answer that for you right now. You're going to join him and be his new friend.
Exactly.
I'm going to have all types of, he's going to start slipping you all types of money. Like, listen, I only want to come out every 3 days. Okay. I make it worth your while.
Just start delivering. But I have a similar answer. I worked overnights in psych hospitals for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And the best thing that I can tell you about working in psych hospitals is there is a level of acceptance that I've never seen anywhere else. No matter how fucking weird you are, psych patients will just be like, yeah, that's Tony. He's cool. And it's so awesome. There's none of that other shit to it unless they want to fuck with you. If they want to like push your buttons, then yeah, definitely. But overall, for the most part, and I feel like, overnights there, vampires walking up and down, and psych patients would just be like, oh, good, someone to talk to. And I'd never have to worry about the vampire falling asleep on shift because I know he slept all day. And yeah, I think it'd be a great job for them. Outside of that, I would say drive through at Jack in the Box because I think it would be a good place to meet people who wouldn't be able to put up much of a fight. I won't say why this second, but I feel like it'd be easy prey.
Jesus Christ. Somebody has their plan. I think we've all had night jobs or overnight jobs because a couple of ones that I had, it was I worked for a courier service where all I did was answer the phones inside of an office, which would not have given me the opportunity to go find food at night. So I guess that sucks. However, I did have a lot of late nights in college. Mm-hmm. So that'd be the perfect place to do it.
I like that. What did you guys think about the friendship of the two women in this film? And like, I feel like one's basically like, oh, you got to do it. You'd be royalty, and then it gets kind of weird. But I really liked their relationship and felt like it was just more well done than what I would have expected writers to write two women's relationship like at the time.
Oh, yeah. I definitely think so. It's, I wish that there was more. I mean, this movie is so tight. It's so short that I wish there was a little bit more of everything, actually.
Yeah.
But what it does, it gives you like a look into the depth of the pool there without going too deep into it itself. And I kind of want more scenes of just the two of them, actually. Like, they were kind of charming and fun together.
Yeah, no, I thought they were great together. So we talked about this in some other episodes over the 2 years we've done this show now, but a lot of times we push for like, you really should have cut 10 or 15 minutes out of that film, Mm-hmm. And this is the example that I will probably use going forward, going, look, very rarely, but occasionally, I need a slight bit more. Yes. Like, yeah, it's tight as fuck and it's great. And maybe it's the whole leave them wanting more thing, but I definitely would have liked more from pretty much everyone, like you said.
And Lucy gets killed so quickly in this version. There's no lingering, and we don't get to spend much, we hear reports afterwards, but that's it.
Right.
And it's pretty much like, there's the one visitation, and then she's on the slab the next day, and that's it. I always liked in the book, they describe her as the Blooper Lady, because it's a kid, and I always tried to figure out what the term Blooper Lady meant, and even Googling it, it's like lady vampire, because it came from this when she gets turned, and that's like the only meaning of it. They do play that up a lot more in that modern BBC version, and kind of her heartbreak and connection to the children, and it's really interesting to get to see more of that, to get to go in depth to the victim, and then like the continuing cycle of abuse and victimhood that transpires after Dracula turns you.
I really got to check that out sometime.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's only like 3 episodes or something. It's super short.
Well, this is something that bothers me just about not necessarily about this film, but it made me think about it. And this is just with the general issue as it relates to how you can fight off Dracula or how you can fight off a vampire. Everything I've seen, and maybe I'm overlooking some stuff that's happened in other films or other stories themselves, but it seems as though Christianity or crucifixes themselves or Christian rituals are the only ones that seem to work when it comes to Dracula, right? Or any vampire for that matter. And when Renfield first goes to that village, all these people are warning him and saying like, hey, don't go to Dracula's castle because, he's a monster. Like, don't go up there. And he just kind of, he blows them off as, oh, you guys are just kind of, ignorant hicks, ignorant little country folk, peasants. Really, there's nothing there. I'm going to handle his papers and I'm going to handle his affairs. We have business. And there's this moment where, these people are telling him it's not going to be a good situation for him. And he goes ahead and does what he does. But later on, Van Helsing makes this comment about science and superstition, right? And he says, oh, superstition, or what used to be known as superstition, is science today. But he himself uses a religious device to combat this man. And he also, and maybe it's also this thing that Van Helsing points out about, oh, you're susceptible to his charms if you believe in him or believe that he can do these things. So maybe the vampire thing is at least responding to artifacts or religious tools, instruments, things like that is part of their superstition. But I don't understand why it's just Christian tools. I don't know if either one of you have seen anything on that, or why Star of David doesn't work. I actually, I did see a film where somebody, the vampire thought it was a crucifix, but it was a Star of David, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I'm good." It was Bordello of Blood, by the way, or even some other type of religious symbolism, where somebody happens to have a Buddha statue or something, and he's like, "Oh God, I can't attack you while you have that in your house."
Well, I mean, the short answer is that it's written by the people it's written by who view those other religions as the outsider they're trying to keep out. So if they validated all religions, then we wouldn't have to be as scared. But if only one religion can protect you from this.
I'm of the opinion that none of it should work, including the crucifix. Definitely to play in phobia and religious prejudice, things like that. It works to have the crucifix there because of, when we talked about this earlier, this idea of xenophobia and fear of immigrants and fear of the outsider. Those outside groups were bringing in strange traditions, strange beliefs, strange practices, so much so that in 1917, 1921, 24, 27, even through the Great Depression, you had these extremely restrictive immigration policies that specified certain religious practices or beliefs as, not saying this religion is going to be barred, but they would list things that were inherent within a certain religion to bar someone from coming into the country. I don't know what the rules were with the British, but they were very restrictive in the first half of the United States, first half of the 20th century in the United States with respect to barring people from coming in, but preferring people from other countries. With the quota systems and things like that.
I was thinking of it, and this is because I have been neck deep in folk horror these past couple weeks. Have either one of you guys gotten a chance to see Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched yet?
No.
No, but I hear it's absolutely amazing. One of our friends was saying it's like, what did he say? It was like 2 hours or 3 hours long, and he wished that it was 2 to 3 more hours long, like, because he was so into it.
Oh, yeah. They go over like 200 movies through the runtime of it. And it's like 3 something, I think, is what it comes in at. And if you get a chance to like do an online festival or anything coming up, I definitely would recommend it just for that documentary. And since then, I've fallen down the rabbit hole of folk horror, and a major component of it is the old world against Christianity, because a lot of it is British in nature, and it's their overwhelming religion. And kind of the text for folk horror itself is the Wicker Man, where you have, the pagan rites against the upright Christian policeman, and the two of those, and we see how it works out for him. But I think that using that lens, and Dracula is kind of this combination of all these myths and urban legends. I mean, they weren't urban at the time, but of Vlad the Impaler and the more Eastern European pagan traditions that were there, and just foreign, like you were saying, James, to the guy who wrote the story and the people who continue to tell it. But I mean, there's vampires. There's Chinese hopping vampires. We have vampires all over the place. There's lots of different kinds, but the one that sticks around is this one that is something older, something from the old world, kind of beyond our kin, beyond our understanding, that is coming to invade the rest of us in our upright Christian homes, essentially. And I think that is looking at the folkloric aspects of it, especially, I mean, we get a little bit of it here in the beginning of this version of it. The book plays it up a lot more from what I remember. And I know definitely there's different versions that play with that. A lot of times we only get Dracula or the Dracula stand-in in the New World or in the Western world. Something like Dracula Untold, we get his supposed origin story. But even that was still kind of a Christian myth, the way that they told it. So I think it's interesting to look back at it through. I think folk horror is like, as a genre, it's hard to define, but as a lens, I think it can be very useful. Okay, I do love the scene, absolutely love the scene where he insinuates himself into everybody's life at the opera.
Yes.
I think that is so slick, and the way that he plays to everybody, like he turns fully towards them and gives them his full attention. And it makes me think of in Talented Mr. Ripley, when they're talking about Dickie, and when he's your friend, it feels like the sun is shining on your face. And because he has that ability to make you feel important just by drawing his attention. And I think that's where Dracula's hypnotism of these people starts. Like, he's obviously better than us. Look at us. He's wearing this cape. He talks like he does. He's buying a whole abbey. He's our better, even though we are upper class. He's descended from royalty.
Yeah. And even just the way he carries himself, like you have all these other pretty upper class people, and he still carries himself better than they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that rings through so much in this film. And again, that's probably mostly Lugosi doing it, but like it resonated for me. It was instantly like, when he's with them, he's better than them. And like you said, he gives them attention, and they're like, oh my God, thank you.
Yes.
Like, I can't imagine that these people normally react that way to other people,
especially the women. Like, the way that Lucy responds to him, and she's just instantly drawn in and fascinated by him. probably at the time was because women were viewed as the weaker sex and thus more malleable to his charms. But I think the way that it's played, it really is like this instant seduction. And I think it's so, it definitely leaves it open to be interpreted and not just kind of looked down on as sexist today.
Well, there's also that idea of he's pursuing them, and at least the image he's presenting is what should be the thing that they engaged in. You know, when we talked about wealth, privilege, power, that is something that they're supposed to respond to, as opposed to, oh, this is, you know, somebody who they would look down upon. Like, oh, this is, you know, Michael Dracula who you know cleans my father's chamber pots.
Right.
So I mean, it's an opportunity for them to move on, move up, move out. And the money that he has, you know, apparently from what he's saying, is enough to get their attention. And then the status is something that pushes it over the limit.
Just look at the difference between the way that Renfield treats the villagers and the way that he treats the Count.
Yes.
He's immediately deferential to the Count and scornful of the villagers. Like, even though he's meeting, when they meet in the front foyer of the castle that's all run down and everything, he's still like, oh, I thought things were kind of fucked up, but clearly you're here and you are a man of great means, and I will defer to you.
Mm-hmm.
He takes on the subservient role to him. And in the book, Harker does the same thing. It takes him longer, but he bows to the man because he views him as coming from this line of aristocracy and wealth.
Right. It's just better.
And that's what you do in polite society.
To hell with polite society.
It's getting there.
Aww.
All right. So I think that brings us to the movie recommendations, where we tell people other things they should watch. Josh, would you like to tell our listeners what you think they should watch if they liked this film?
Yes, I would.
Sweet. It would have been awkward if you said no.
No, go fuck yourself. That's a horrible idea.
That's better.
So kind of going backwards, the other film everyone would talk about would be Nosferatu, the original illegal adaptation of this story, where they tried to skirt around copyright laws and, you know, kind of give people different names. But for my money, Vampire is the superior film and should be talked about way more. It came a year after this Dracula, and it was directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. And there is camera work and technique in this film that I watched it maybe 6 months ago again, and like, I can't figure out how they did this stuff. There are things that it is that impressive, and they use clearly stagecraft and what would have been magic tricks at the time to pull off some of these things with the way that you see the shadows interacting with the real world and the tracking cameras that they use. It's just so beautiful and impressive and such an expressive film. And I think that not enough people have seen that particular one.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
I will add that to my list, but I'll put it above the things I don't want to watch that Don tells me about. So I'm going to do two double features today. The one that I actually did was, of course, Dracula and Frankenstein together, which was cool because it was both films that are 90 years old and, you know, just kind of diving back into this whole idea. And of course, Frankenstein is our episode next week. But if you were going to sit me down and let me run the double feature that I want, I'm going to go with two Todd Browning films. So I'm going to go Dracula and Freaks. And my reason is these two films they just held up really well, in my opinion, for what they are. And they were both, we did Freaks as an episode a while ago, but they've both they just really reminded me how much, just because it's old doesn't mean it sucks. Mm-hmm. In my head, I kind of start thinking, oh, that was 90 years ago. How good could the filming be, or how good could this be? And then I watch it and I'm like, oh shit. Okay, cool. And you were just talking about with Vampire, that sounds so interesting to me, because I'm starting to become obsessed with how the old films were made and how they look, and I don't know. So that's the way I would go. Freaks and Dracula. Don, what do you got?
Go ahead and cross a couple off of mine. There we go.
It's Freaks, wasn't it?
Actually, it was Nosferatu.
There you go.
So, All right. So we've already mentioned some of these films. I just want to repeat them. Interview with the Vampire, What We Do in the Shadows. I mentioned True Blood. But I would be remiss if I did not mention this one, and I would not forgive myself. Once Bitten.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gives you the flip. As far as it's flipping gender, and it was one of my favorite movies as a kid to watch. I think Lauren Hutton's in that one. Vampire in Brooklyn, which we covered on the show a while ago. From Dusk Till Dawn, Transfiguration. You already mentioned Dracula Unleashed. But then two films that hit on the xenophobia, outsiders, and any number of other things that you can get into. I'm sorry, three films. Reefer Madness would be the first one. And then two by D.W. Griffith, Broken Blossoms, which is about a Chinese immigrant to England who doesn't necessarily have a relationship with a young woman, but there's this, I guess, sexual tension or taboo as far as them coming into contact with each other. And it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending. It does, I guess, if you're a xenophobe and a racist. But and then the last film I'm going to mention is, of course, my favorite horror film of all time, Birth of a Nation. That has to deal with labeling people as monsters, and then, the wrong people claim to be heroes. But
but no one drives a stake through their heart, unfortunately.
Yeah, it'd be nice if somebody did.
I did remember other one I wanted to mention during this, which is I just watched it during lockdown. It got streaming on Criterion Channel a while back during their 70s horror film that they did, I think, last year. And that is Daughters of Darkness. 1971, Belgian. It's classified as an erotic horror film with lesbian vampires. It uses this great old hotel as kind of the centerpiece where all the action takes place. And it's about this young couple who is there on a little vacation, a stayover, as they're going to visit their family. And it's the off season, and the only other people are this seemingly mother and daughter who may or may not be vampiresses. And it's gothic and beautiful and very glamorous, and just has this great, more modern European feel to it. But, the old world of this glamorous hotel that they're all staying in. And it's just so cool and cold feeling. And I loved it from when I saw it. So that was the other one. I was going to try to work it in earlier, and I totally forgot. So, Daughters of Darkness.
That brings me back to something I wanted to say earlier, which is feminism and lesbianism is also people coming for our women. And I meant to throw that in earlier, but it's kind of awesome that this came full circle. So thank you for that.
Nice.
All right. So do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you on social media or anything else you feel like pushing?
Yes, you can find me. I'm on Twitter as @Spartacus, SPARTICKES. It's a pun on my last name. I believe I'm Josh.Ickes on Instagram. My podcast, Nashville, CA, as in Nashville, California, because I'm from Nashville and Sean's from California. It's hilarious. We worked really hard on that one.
Way harder than we did. We picked a name and went, that'll look great in print. We'll never say it out loud.
I just pictured the Hollywood sign, but saying Nashville was how mine happened. Yes.
Great.
That's all the places I am for the most part.
Very cool. So, as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com.